The day my son brought his fiancée's family to meet me, I was under a 1987 Chevy pickup with grease up to my elbows and a bad feeling in my gut that I couldn't shake. My name is Lou Mercer, 63 years old, semi-retired, and still the owner of Mercer Auto and Repair on Route 9 just outside Knoxville, Tennessee. I've had that shop for 31 years. Built it from a single-bay garage I rented for $400 a month into a 6-bay operation with 8 full-time mechanics and a reputation in 3 counties. I'm not a wealthy man by the standards of the people I'm about to tell you about. But I'm not the man they thought I was either. My son's name is Cole. He was 32, sharp as a tack, got his engineering degree from UT, and landed a job at a construction firm in Nashville. I'm proud of him every single day. His mother, my wife, Ruth Ann. She passed 8 years ago from a stroke. It was just the 2 of us after that, and we got close in the way that men do when grief forces them to actually talk to each other. Cole called me every Sunday. Never missed one. About a year ago, he told me he'd met someone. Her name was Alexis. I asked him about her, and he said carefully, the way you say something when you're hoping the other person won't push too hard, that her family was kind of a big deal in Nashville. I didn't think much of it. I just asked if she made him happy. He said yes, that was enough for me. The first time I met Alexis was at a dinner Cole arranged at a steakhouse in Nashville. She was pretty, polished, the kind of woman who looks like she was assembled by committee to be impressive at parties. She shook my hand and smiled, but her eyes went straight to my jacket. A decent Carhartt that I'd worn because Cole had said, "Casual is fine, Dad," and something shifted in her expression. Just for a second, like she'd bitten into something and found it slightly off. Her parents were something else entirely. Her father, Whitfield Crane, was a commercial real estate developer. Big man, pink face, the kind of handshake that's more performance than greeting. He'd developed half the mixed-use properties in the Green Hills corridor and didn't let you forget it for more than about 4 minutes. Her mother, Suzanne, wore a dress that probably cost more than my first car and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. Dinner was fine on the surface. We talked about Cole's job, the firm he worked for, the projects they were building. Whitfield asked me what I did, and I told him I owned an auto repair shop. He nodded the way people nod when they're already thinking about their next sentence. Suzanne asked if it was a chain. I said no, just mine. She said how sweet and turned back to her wine. Cole watched me across the table. I gave him a small nod. I was fine. I'd been underestimated by better people than these. What I didn't know then was that Whitfield Crane had a plan, and Cole was part of it, and I was the variable he hadn't calculated correctly. 3 months later, Cole called me on a Wednesday night, which was unusual. Not a Sunday call. His voice was tight. "Dad, Alexis's father wants to have a dinner. Just you and him and Suzanne. He says he has a business proposition." "What kind of proposition?" A pause. "He's got a commercial development deal that needs a private investor. He's been going around to family connections. He wants $250,000. I set down the coffee mug I was holding. "Cole, I know, Dad. He thinks I have $250,000. I don't think he actually thinks that. I think," Cole stopped. "I think this is his way of sizing you up, of seeing where you fall in the pecking order." I was quiet for a moment. "You want me to go to this dinner?" "I think," Cole said slowly, "that it might be worth going." There was something in his voice I recognized. It was the same voice he'd used when he was 16 and had something figured out that he hadn't told me yet. "All right," I said. "I'll go." The dinner was at a place called Hartley's on West End, the kind of restaurant where they don't put prices on the menu and the portions are small enough that you're hungry again by the time you get home. I wore my best clothes, a navy blazer, gray trousers, dress shoes I'd bought for Ruth Ann's funeral and hadn't worn since. Whitfield was already at the table when I arrived. He stood to shake my hand, and I could see him taking inventory of me the way you assess a vehicle when it first rolls into the bay. Looking for signs of what's under the hood. "Lou," he said, "glad you could make it." Suzanne was there too, pearls and all. She gave me the same smile from the first dinner. We ordered. Whitfield talked about the development, a mixed-use corridor in Murfreesboro. Retail on the ground floor, apartments above, a projected 12% annual return. He made it sound like a favor he was doing rather than a request he was making. He was good at that. Then he leaned forward. Lou, I'll be straight with you. I'm looking for family investment in this project. Keeps the money close, keeps the relationships tight. I'd like to bring you in for $250,000, I said. That's right. I looked at him. He was watching me with the polite confidence of a man who already knows the answer to a question he's asking a child. What's the timeline on returns? I asked. He blinked. That wasn't the response he prepared for. 18 months to first distribution, full return projection at 5 years. Who holds the note? Another blink. The LLC we structured for the project, and the collateral. Whitfield smiled, but it was different now. Recalibrating. The property itself is the collateral, which you don't own yet. The smile stayed but went cold. We're in contract. Earnest money deposited or still in negotiation window. There was a short silence. Suzanne looked at her husband. Whitfield looked at me with new eyes, not warmer ones. I have to say, Lou, I didn't expect, for a mechanic, auto and repair shop owner, I said. 31 years. He recovered quickly the way smooth men do. Of course, you've clearly done some research. I haven't done any research, I said. I've just been in business long enough to know what questions to ask before I put my money somewhere. What I didn't tell Whitfield Crane that night was what I was actually worth. My shop, at last appraisal. I'd had it done 18 months prior when a regional chain made an offer. Was valued at just under $1.2 million. I owned the building and the lot outright. I also had a parcel of commercial land on Route 9 that I'd bought for next to nothing in 1999 that was now worth considerably more, sitting in a part of the county that had developed faster than anyone expected. My financial advisor in Knoxville, a quiet woman named Beverly who'd been steering my retirement account since Ruth Ann died, had told me 6 months prior that my total net worth, liquid and non-liquid combined, was somewhere between $2.4 and $2.8 million. I wasn't rich, not by Nashville real estate developer standards, but I was nobody's pity case. I told Whitfield I'd think about it. He seemed pleased by that, interpreting it, I think, as the response of a man who needed to check how much he had in savings. We shook hands, and I drove home. Cole called me before I was back on the interstate. How'd it go? Your future father-in-law is a careful man, I said, but he made assumptions. Cole was quiet. Then, Dad, I need to tell you something. Alexis doesn't know I'm calling you, but her father has been making comments about you, about what kind of family I come from. He told Alexis that he was concerned I had financial liabilities on my side. I kept my eyes on the road, meaning me, meaning you, and Alexis. Another pause. She loves me, Dad. I really believe that, but she's been raised to care about certain things, and some of it has. He stopped. She said something last week. We were talking about the wedding venue, and she said she hoped you'd be comfortable in a formal setting. She said it in a kind way, but, yeah. I drove in silence for a mile or so. The lights of Nashville fell away behind me and the dark of the interstate opened up ahead. Cole, I said, do you trust me? More than anyone. Then let me handle this my way. He didn't ask what my way was. That's the thing about trust when it's real. It doesn't need a full explanation. The engagement party was 6 weeks later, held at the Cranes' home in Belle Meade, a neighborhood where the driveways are longer than most people's streets, and the landscaping alone costs more than my shop's monthly payroll. A big white colonial with columns and a catering van parked out front when I arrived. I came alone, drove myself in my personal truck, a clean F-150, not new but not embarrassing. I wore the navy blazer again, pressed this time, with a better shirt. I was walking up the front steps when I heard it. 2 women just inside the open front door, talking to each other in the low, carrying voice that people use when they think they're being quiet but aren't. One of them was Suzanne. Just hope he doesn't track motor oil through the house, she was saying, and the other woman laughed. Then Suzanne added, more quietly, "Whitfield keeps saying he's harmless, a sweet old grease monkey who won't cause trouble. Cole's the one with potential. The father is just background." I stopped on the second step. I could have turned around. Part of me wanted to. I thought about Ruth Ann, about what she would have said. She would have squeezed my hand and said, "Lou, some people show you exactly who they are, and you ought to believe them." She was usually right about things like that, but I thought about Cole. And I kept walking. Inside, the party was the kind of thing that looks effortless and costs a fortune. Past appetizers, a string quartet in the corner, maybe 60 people in expensive clothes holding wine glasses. Alexis was across the room and she saw me come in. She excused herself from the group she was with and came over, and to her credit, her smile looked real. "Lou," she said, kissing my cheek, "I'm so glad you made it. Wouldn't miss it," I said. She introduced me to a few people, and I could feel the social geometry of it. I was being managed, pleasantly, to the edges of the room, steered toward the appetizers and away from the clusters of Crane family friends, where business and money were the primary language. Whitfield came over eventually. He clapped me on the shoulder in the way that men do when they want to appear warm and feel superior simultaneously. "Lou, glad you're here. Settle in. Make yourself comfortable." He said it with the generous tone of a man welcoming someone to a place they don't quite belong. "Thank you, Whitfield. Your home is beautiful." "Suzanne's vision," he said. "She has the eye." We made small talk. He asked about the shop. I told him business was good. He nodded the way he'd nodded the first time, already composing his next sentence. Then his eyes went to someone across the room, and his expression shifted into something more serious, more engaged. He excused himself, and I was left standing next to a tray of bruschetta, watching the room. Cole found me about 20 minutes later. He put his arm around my shoulder, and we stood together in that way we'd learned after his mother died, comfortable with silence, not needing to fill it. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine, son. Dad." He turned to look at me, and there was something careful and deliberate in his face. "I know about what Mom always said, about believing people when they show you who they are. She was a smart woman. She was." He paused. "I want you to know something. I've seen some things in the past few weeks that have." He stopped. "Just trust me. Okay? Tonight, trust me." There it was again, that voice. The 16-year-old voice was something figured out. "I trust you," I said. What happened next came about 40 minutes later, after the toasts had been given and the music had softened and people had moved into the living room with their desserts. Whitfield called for attention. He had the practiced ease of a man who's made many speeches in many rooms and knows it. He talked about Cole, about Alexis, about the joining of families and futures. He said kind things about Cole's work ethic, his potential, his bright future. He didn't mention me. Then he said he had a small business matter to share, which was interesting timing for an engagement party, but the room seemed used to Whitfield mixing pleasure with commerce. He announced that he was formalizing his Murfreesboro development project and inviting close family to participate. He mentioned a figure, $500,000 per investor unit. He mentioned projected returns. Several people in the room nodded with the interest of people who have money to deploy. Then he looked at me across the room with a smile that was perfectly calibrated, kind enough to seem gracious, pointed enough to make a statement. "Lou," he said, "I know this particular opportunity may be a bit out of range, but we're glad to have you in the family regardless." There was a brief, polite moment of nothing. A few people glanced my way, and I thought, there it is. I set down my wine glass on a side table. I walked toward Whitfield, through the room, and people shifted slightly to let me through because of the way I was walking, I suppose. Not fast, not aggressive, just steady and certain. I stopped a few feet from him. "I appreciate that, Whitfield," I said. "Actually, I've been giving your project some thought." He blinked. Behind him, Suzanne was watching. "I had my financial advisor pull some numbers," I said. "I also had my attorney review the LLC structure you described at dinner. There are some issues with the collateral arrangement that would need to be resolved before any serious investment conversation, but those are fixable. The room was quiet now, not awkwardly, just attentively. The bigger question for me, I continued, is whether this is an investment I want to make into this particular family's business at this particular time. Whitfield's smile was working hard to stay in place. And I've decided that it isn't, I said. Not because I can't, but because I'm not sure the partnership would be sound. I looked at him steadily. A business relationship requires trust, and I'm not certain we have that foundation. Whitfield stared at me. I should also tell you, I said, in the spirit of honesty that families ought to have with each other, my shop was appraised 14 months ago at just under $1.2 million. I own the property outright. I have additional commercial holdings in Knox County. My total net worth is somewhere between $2.4 and $2.8 million, depending on current valuations. I'm not telling you this to impress you. I'm telling you because I think you've made some decisions about what I am, based on what I look like and what I do for a living, and I'd like those decisions to be made with correct information. The silence in the room was complete. Whitfield Crane, for the first time since I'd met him, had no sentence ready. Then Cole's voice came from behind me. I knew, he said. Everyone looked at him. He was standing at the edge of the room, straight and calm. He looked at Alexis, and there was something tender and serious in his expression. I've known about my dad's finances for about 2 years, Cole said. He told me after Mom passed. We had a long talk about planning. He paused. I've also known about some of the things that have been said in this house over the past few months, about my dad, about where I come from. His eyes moved to his future in-laws. I want to be clear. I love Alexis, and I want to build a life with her. But I need that life to include my father, not as background, not as a footnote, as my father, with the respect that's owed to him. Alexis had gone pale, not in a cruel way, in the way of someone who has heard something true and is in the process of reckoning with it. She crossed the room and took Cole's hand. She looked at her parents and then at me. I'm sorry, Lou, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Some things were said that shouldn't have been. In my house, I should have addressed them before tonight. I looked at her for a moment. She wasn't performing. She was just a young woman standing in the truth of something uncomfortable. I appreciate that, Alexis, I said. What happened in the weeks after that party was quieter than you might expect. There were difficult conversations between Cole and Alexis. There were conversations between Alexis and her parents that Cole only told me about in pieces. Whitfield Crane called me once, about 10 days after the party, and his voice was different, not warm exactly, but leveled. He apologized for the comment at the party. I accepted it. I didn't tell him it was the comment inside the front door that had cost more. Suzanne sent a card, handwritten. She said she'd made assumptions and she was sorry for them. I put the card on the refrigerator because Ruth Ann always said that the hardest apologies are the ones that deserve the most credit. The investment project I declined. Whitfield ended up filling the slots with other investors and the project moved forward. I read about it in the Nashville Business Journal a while later. It seemed to be going fine. That was good. I hadn't rejected it to punish him. I'd rejected it to punish him. I'd rejected it because it was the right business decision, which it was, independently of everything else. Cole and Alexis got married the following September. Small ceremony, 50 people, venue in Liper's Fork out in Williamson County, white tent in a field with lights strung through the trees. Ruth Ann would have loved it. I danced with Alexis at the reception. She was a good dancer. Better than me by a significant margin. She laughed when I stepped on her foot and said, "You're not as clumsy as you look." And I said, "Actually, I'm exactly as clumsy as I look." And she laughed again, and it felt, for the first time, like the beginning of something real. Whitfield shook my hand at the end of the night. Properly this time, none of the performance in it. Cole's lucky to have a father like you, he said. I looked at him and thought about all the ways I could respond to that. I'm the lucky one, I said, because that was true, and it didn't cost me anything to say so. On the drive home that night, Back down the interstate toward Knoxville, with the windows cracked and the late September air coming through, I thought about what my father used to say when I was a boy helping him with his small engine repair business out of his garage in Maryville. He had a sign above the workbench, hand-lettered on a piece of barnwood, that said, "The work tells you who a man is. Everything else is just talking." I never took that sign down when I built my own shop. It's still there, above the third bay. Faded now, the letters harder to read in bad light, but I know what it says,